Imagine this. You're flying a B-17 Flying Fortress, a colossal four-engine bomber returning from a mission deep inside enemy territory. Your aircraft is riddled with flak damage, one or two engines are out, and you're losing altitude fast. Ahead of you lies not a long, pristine runway, but a tiny, makeshift British airfield, barely long enough for a small fighter plane. Standard procedure says you bail out or attempt a crash landing in a field. But one American pilot, Colonel Joe Kelly, looked at this impossible situation and developed a technique so radical, so dangerous, it was nicknamed the Suicidal Landing. Yet this very method would go on to save countless lives and their multi-million-dollar aircraft. This is the incredible story of how one man's daring innovation rewrote the rules of flight and turned certain disaster into a chance at survival. During the height of the air war over Europe, the sight of battle-damaged B-17s limping back to England was tragically common. These heavy bombers, weighing over 30 tons, needed a lot of runway to land safely, typically around 5,000 feet. But many of the emergency airfields in southern England were originally built for the Royal Air Force as smaller Spitfires and Hurricanes with runways as short as 3,000 feet. For a crippled B-17, attempting a landing on one of these was a recipe for disaster. The planes would often overshoot the runway, crashing into buildings, trees, or simply cartwheeling into a fiery wreck. The losses were staggering, not just in terms of aircraft, but inexperienced aircrews who had survived the horrors of combat only to perish on their own soil. The conventional wisdom for landing a B-17 or any large aircraft was to make a long, shallow approach. You'd gradually decrease altitude and airspeed, flying a gentle glide path down to the runway. This method is safe and stable, but it consumes a huge amount of horizontal distance. It's like rolling a bowling ball very slowly. You need a long lane to get it to the pins. For a damaged bomber with failing engines and compromised controls, maintaining this stable, slow descent was often impossible. Even if they could, the short runways meant they'd touch down too far in and have no room to stop. The result was almost always catastrophic. The USAAF was desperate for a solution. They needed a way to get these behemoths down on a postage stamp. Enter Lieutenant Colonel Joe Kelly of the 381st Bomb Group. Kelly was a seasoned pilot, known for his calm demeanor and exceptional flying skills. He watched crew after crew face the impossible choice between bailing out over the English Channel or attempting a landing that was likely to fail. He knew there had to be a better way. He started to think outside the box, questioning the very fundamentals of heavy bomber piloting. What if, instead of a long, shallow approach, you did the exact opposite? What if you came in high and steep? It sounded completely counterintuitive, even insane. A steep approach would mean a dangerously high sink rate. It was the kind of maneuver you were trained from day one to avoid at all costs. But Kelly had a theory. His idea was to fly the B-17 almost like a dive bomber. The pilot would approach the airfield at a much higher altitude than normal, say around 2,000 feet directly over the start of the runway. Then they would cut the power, drop the landing gear, and deploy full flaps. This would create an enormous amount of drag, turning the sleek bomber into a flying brick. The plane would then enter a steep, almost alarmingly sharp descent, aiming for the very beginning of the runway. The key was to use gravity to their advantage, essentially dropping the aircraft into the small landing area instead of flying it in. It was a high-risk, high-reward strategy that required immense precision and nerves of steel. The final and most critical part of Kelly's technique was the flare, just a few feet above the ground. As the runway threshold rushed up to meet them, the pilot had to aggressively pull back on the yoke. This action would pitch the nose up sharply, arresting the steep descent, and flaring out into a landing attitude, ideally with the main wheels touching down right on the numbers. The timing had to be perfect. Flare too early and the plane would stall and drop like a stone. Flare too late, and you'd smash into the runway with catastrophic force. It was a violent, seat-of-your-pants maneuver that put immense stress on both the airframe and the pilot. For this reason, many of Kelly's contemporaries dismissed it as a suicidal stunt. But Kelly was convinced it would work. To prove it, he decided to demonstrate the technique himself. He took a perfectly good B-17 up, flew to a short airfield, and to the horror of the onlookers on the ground, put the bomber into a steep, terrifying dive towards the runway. People thought he had lost control. Emergency crews prepared for the worst. Then, at the last possible second, Kelly executed the flare. The B-17's nose snapped up, its descent was instantly broken, and the giant aircraft settled onto the runway with a gentle squeak, rolling to a stop with hundreds of feet to spare. He had done it. He had landed a B-17 in a space previously thought impossible. The demonstration was a stunning success. Kelly began training other pilots in his group, taking them up and showing them how to perform the steep, short-field approach. It was a difficult skill to master. It went against every instinct they had been taught. Pilots had to unlearn years of training and trust this new, radical method. They practiced over and over, learning to judge the steep angle of descent and, most importantly, mastering the precise timing of the flare. It was nerve-wracking, but as they saw it work, their confidence grew. They now had a tool, a last-ditch option that could turn a hopeless situation into a survivable one. Soon, word of the Kelly method spread throughout the 8th Air Force. What was once dismissed as a suicidal stunt became official doctrine for emergency landings. Pilots returning from missions with heavy damage and failing engines knew they had a fighting chance if they could just make it back to England. The sight of a B-17 dropping out of the sky at a sharp angle, only to gracefully touch down on a short runway, became a testament to Kelly's genius and the skill of the pilots he trained. While exact numbers are hard to come by, it is widely acknowledged that this single technique was responsible for saving hundreds of B-17s and, more importantly, the lives of their 10-man crews. This story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest innovations come from challenging conventional wisdom and daring to do the impossible. Colonel Joe Kelly didn't invent a new piece of technology. He reimagined the relationship between a pilot, their aircraft, and the laws of physics. He saw a problem not as an insurmountable obstacle, but as a puzzle to be solved, even if the solution seemed crazy at first. His legacy isn't just in the planes and lives he saved, but in the spirit of ingenuity and courage that defines the greatest aviators in history. He proved that even in the darkest moments of war, one person's bold idea can make all the difference. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story of wartime innovation as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of incredible engineering and human bravery. Let me know in the comments what you think of Colonel Kelly's daring maneuver. Would you have had the guts to try it? Until next time, fly safe.